It was a busy afternoon at one of the largest airports in the city. People were rushing around trying to catch their flights or waiting anxiously for loved ones to arrive. The sound of rolling suitcases echoed through the halls, and announcements about delayed flights blared over the loudspeakers. Among the crowd stood Maya Thompson, a confident and stylish black woman who had just finished an important business meeting. She wore a sharp navy blue blazer with matching heels, her posture exuding grace and professionalism as she navigated the chaos of the terminal. Maya was no stranger to airports. She traveled frequently for work and always made sure to plan ahead. Today, however, things weren't going quite as smoothly as usual. Her flight home had been delayed for reasons that weren't clearly explained, leaving her stuck at the boarding gate with nothing but time on her hands. As she approached the counter to ask for clarification, she noticed a police officer standing nearby. His name tag read, Officer Greg Harris, and his demeanor seemed tense, almost irritated by the constant flow of questions from passengers. Maya waited patiently for her turn, observing how Officer Harris interacted with others. Some travelers received curt responses while others got none at all. When it was finally her turn, she stepped forward and politely asked, "Excuse me, officer, could you please tell me if there's any update on Flight 427? I've been waiting here for nearly an hour." Instead of offering assistance, Officer Harris barely glanced at her before replying in a dismissive tone, "Ma'am, step back, you're holding up the line." Taken aback by his rudeness, Maya raised her eyebrows but didn't let her frustration show. "Not yet." "I'm sorry," she said calmly, "but I'm not holding anyone up. I just wanted to know if there's news about my flight." Officer Harris sighed loudly, rolling his eyes as though he couldn't believe she was still speaking. Then without warning, he snapped, "Look, lady, if you can't follow simple instructions, maybe flying isn't for you. Why don't you sit down and stop wasting everyone's time?" The words hit Maya like a slap across the face. A hush fell over the small group of passengers nearby, some of whom turned to stare at the scene unfolding before them. One older man shook his head disapprovingly, while a young mother whispered something to her teenage daughter. Maya felt heat rising in her chest, not from embarrassment, but from anger. This wasn't the first time someone had treated her this way because of the color of her skin, but today she decided would be different. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. Stepping away from the counter, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. With a determined look on her face, she pressed the call button and held the phone to her ear. On the other end, a warm voice answered almost immediately. "Hey, love, what's up?" It was Marcus Thompson, Maya's husband, and more importantly, the owner of Skyline Airlines, one of the biggest carriers operating out of the airport. Maya smiled faintly, though her voice carried a hint of steel when she replied, "Hi, babe. I'm at the airport right now and I think we might have a problem with one of your employees, or maybe someone who works here." Without naming names, she recounted what had happened with Officer Harris, emphasizing how unprofessional and disrespectful his behavior had been. Marcus listened intently, his brow furrowing as each detail sank in. He knew how hard Maya worked to succeed in her career, breaking barriers and overcoming obstacles every step of the way. Hearing about this blatant disrespect infuriated him. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said firmly. "I'll handle this. Stay where you are. I'm sending someone over immediately." As Maya hung up the phone, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Officer Harris may have thought he was untouchable, but little did he know his actions had set off a chain reaction that would soon come back to haunt him. For now, Maya simply stood there, watching as the officer continued to bark orders at unsuspecting travelers. Little did he realize his day was about to take a drastic turn, for the worse. The tension in the air was palpable, and the atmosphere at the boarding gate grew heavier with each passing moment. Passengers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what was about to happen next. Meanwhile, Maya remained calm, her confidence unwavering. She knew that justice wasn't always served instantly, but when it came, it would be undeniable. And today, Officer Harris was about to learn that lesson the hard way. For Maya, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about proving that no matter who you are or where you come from, Your voice matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one phone call to remind the world of that truth. While Maya stood near the boarding gate, her phone pressed tightly to her ear, Officer Harris remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He continued his duties, barking orders at passengers and glaring at anyone who dared approach them, counter with a question. To him, it was just another hectic day at the airport, nothing out of the ordinary. But unbeknownst to Harris, the call Maya had just made would soon turn his world upside down. On the other end of the line, Marcus Thompson listened intently as his wife recounted the incident. His expression shifted from concern to disbelief, then finally settled into something far more serious: anger. Marcus wasn't just any man. He was the CEO of Airlines, one of the most prominent carriers operating out of the airport. With thousands of employees under his leadership and millions in revenue flowing through his company each year, Marcus wielded significant influence, not only within the aviation industry but also among those who worked alongside him, including airport security personnel like Officer Harris. "Okay, sweetheart," Marcus said after a moment of silence, his voice calm but firm. "I'm going to take care of this right now. Don't move. I'll send someone over to stay with you while I handle things." Before ending the call, Marcus reassured Maya that she didn't need to worry anymore. "This kind of behavior isn't acceptable. Not today, not ever," he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. As he hung up, he immediately sprang into action. First, he dialed the number for his head of security, instructing them to locate Officer Harris and escort him to a private office near the terminal. Then he contacted one of his trusted assistants, asking them to go directly to Maya and ensure she felt supported during what had clearly been an upsetting experience. Meanwhile, Maya waited patiently where she stood, her eyes locked onto Officer Harris as if daring him to notice her presence. She didn't want to cause a scene or draw unnecessary attention to herself, but there was a quiet strength in her gaze, a silent promise that justice would be served. Around her, passengers began whispering among themselves, piecing together fragments of what they'd witnessed earlier. Some expressed sympathy for Maya, shaking their heads in disapproval of Harris's behavior. Others simply watched curiously, wondering how the situation would unfold. Within minutes, Marcus's assistant arrived at the boarding gate. A young woman named Sarah, dressed in a crisp uniform bearing the Skyline Airlines logo, approached Maya with a warm smile. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked softly, ensuring she had the right person before continuing. "Mr. Thompson sent me to check on you. Are you okay?" Maya nodded, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm fine, really, just frustrated." Her voice carried a hint of weariness, but her composure never wavered. Together they stepped aside, putting some distance between themselves and Officer Harris. Sarah stayed close, offering words of encouragement and keeping Maya updated on the steps Marcus was taking behind the scenes. Back in his office, Marcus wasted no time addressing the issue. After speaking with his head of security, he reached out to senior executives from both Skyline Airlines and airport management, requesting an emergency meeting. Within half an hour, key decision-makers gathered in a small conference room located near the terminal. The mood was tense, with everyone aware that this wasn't just a minor complaint. It was a potential PR disaster waiting to happen. When Officer Harris was summoned to the office, he had no idea why. Confused but reluctant to argue, he followed two uniformed security officers to the designated location. When he entered the room, he froze. Sitting at the head of the table was none other than Marcus Thompson himself, flanked by executives whose names he vaguely recognized but whose authority he couldn't ignore. For a split second, Harris thought this might be some sort of elaborate prank, but the stern expressions on everyone's faces quickly dispelled that notion. Marcus wasted no time getting straight to the point. Leaning forward slightly, he fixed Harris with a piercing stare. "Officer Harris," he began, his voice measured yet commanding, "we've received reports of inappropriate conduct on your part earlier today. Care to explain yourself?" Caught off guard, Harris stammered, struggling to form coherent sentences. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about," he managed to say, though his voice lacked conviction. I was just doing my job. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Doing your job? Is that what you call treating a passenger with disrespect and making derogatory comments based on their race? His tone grew sharper with each word, cutting through Harris's feeble attempts at denial. Let me remind you that Skyline Airlines values professionalism and respect above all else. If any of our partners fail to uphold those standards, there will be consequences. Harris opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus cut him off before he could speak. Turning to one of the executives seated beside him, he asked, "How many complaints has this officer received in the past year?" The executive shuffled through a stack of papers before responding, "At least 5, sir, all involving similar allegations of rude or discriminatory behavior." Marcus nodded grimly, his jaw tightening as he processed the information. Looking back at Harris, he delivered the final blow. "You've had multiple chances to correct your behavior. Clearly, they haven't worked. Effective immediately. Your contract with this airport is terminated." The room fell silent. Harris's face turned pale as the weight of Marcus's words sank in. Losing his position meant more than unemployment. It meant a stain on his reputation that would follow him wherever he went. As he left the room, humiliated and defeated, word of his dismissal spread quickly among airport staff. Some felt sympathy for him, believing he deserved another chance. Others, however, saw it as long overdue punishment for years of unchecked misconduct. For Maya, the outcome of the meeting came as a relief, but not because she sought revenge. It was about accountability, about proving that power could be used responsibly to protect those who were vulnerable. Knowing that her husband had taken swift and decisive action gave her a renewed sense of hope, not just for herself, but for others who might find themselves in similar situations in the future. As the day drew to a close, Maya reflected on everything that had transpired. What started as a routine trip to the airport had spiraled into something far greater, an opportunity to challenge systemic issues and demand better treatment for marginalized communities. While the encounter with Officer Harris had been painful, it also served as a catalyst for change, a reminder that even in moments of conflict, there's always a chance to make a difference. And so, as Maya prepared to board her rescheduled flight later that evening, she did so with a newfound sense of purpose. This wasn't just her story. It was a story about standing up for what's right, using privilege wisely, and refusing to let injustice go unchallenged. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would inspire countless others to do the same. The tension in the small conference room near the airport terminal was thick enough to cut with a knife. Officer Greg Harris sat slumped in his chair, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as he tried, and failed, to process what had just happened. Marcus Thompson's words echoed in his mind like a death sentence. "Effective immediately, your contract with this airport is terminated." Those 7 words carried more weight than Harris could have imagined, and they left, him feeling exposed, humiliated, and utterly powerless. Marcus leaned back in his seat, his expression calm but unyielding. He wasn't one to gloat or revel in someone else's downfall, but he also knew that moments like these demanded clarity. This wasn't personal. It was about setting an example. Turning to the executive seated beside him, Marcus asked, "What are the next steps we need to take to ensure something like this doesn't happen again?" One of the senior managers cleared her throat before responding. "We'll issue a formal statement addressing the incident and reaffirm our commitment to diversity and inclusion," she said. "Additionally, we'll review all contracts with law enforcement personnel stationed here at the airport. Anyone with a history of misconduct will be reassessed." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good. And let's not stop there. I want us to implement mandatory sensitivity training for every employee who interacts with passengers. No exceptions. If we're serious about creating a safe and respectful environment, we need to start now." The group spent the next hour discussing strategies to prevent future incidents. They talked about everything from stricter hiring protocols to anonymous reporting systems, where passengers could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. By the time the meeting concluded, Marcus felt confident that real change was on the horizon, but he also knew it wouldn't come easily. Change never did. Meanwhile, Maya remained at the boarding gate, accompanied by Sarah, Marcus's assistant. Though she appreciated the support, Maya couldn't help but feel uneasy. She hated being the center of attention, especially under such uncomfortable circumstances. Passengers continued to glance in her direction, whispering among themselves, while others openly expressed admiration for how she'd handled the situation. "You know," one elderly woman said as she passed by, "you stood up for yourself beautifully. Don't ever let anyone treat you like that again." Maya smiled politely, thanking the woman for her kind words, but inside she felt conflicted. While part of her was proud of what she'd done, another part wondered if it was enough. Firing Officer Harris was a step in the right direction, but would it truly make a difference? Or was this just another Band-Aid solution, covering up deeper systemic issues? As the evening wore on, Marcus joined Maya at the gate. He slid into the seat beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I'm okay," Maya replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just, I don't want this to end here." "Marcus, yes, Harris got fired, but what about everyone else? What about the people who are still out there facing discrimination every single day? We can't stop now." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right," he said. "This isn't just about us, it's about using our platform to create lasting change. Let's do something bigger, something meaningful." Together they began brainstorming ideas. Marcus suggested reaching out to local advocacy groups that focused on racial equality and social justice. These organizations often worked tirelessly to combat discrimination in public spaces, and their expertise could prove invaluable in shaping Skyline Airlines' new initiatives. Maya loved the idea, adding that they should also offer financial support to programs aimed at educating young people about diversity and inclusion. By the time Maya's rescheduled flight was called for boarding, they had a solid plan in place. Before leaving, Maya hugged Marcus tightly, grateful for his unwavering support. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." As she walked toward the gate, she couldn't shake the feeling that this experience had changed her. Not just personally, but professionally too. For years, Maya had worked hard to break barriers in her own career, navigating industries that weren't always welcoming to women of color. But today, she realized she had the power to do more than just survive. She could thrive, and in doing so, inspire others to do the same. Back at the office, Marcus wasted no time putting their plans into action. He reached out to several prominent advocacy groups, including the Equal Justice Initiative and the NAACP, inviting them to collaborate on workshops and training sessions for airport staff. To his delight, they eagerly accepted, praising Skyline Airlines for taking such bold steps toward reform. Word of these efforts spread quickly, earning praise from community leaders and travelers alike. Social media platforms lit up with posts celebrating Maya and Marcus's courage, with hashtags like Yarn Accountability, Matters, and Respect for All trending nationwide. Even some former colleagues of Officer Harris expressed gratitude, saying the wake-up call was necessary for systemic reform. But not everyone reacted positively. A small faction of disgruntled employees argued that firing Harris was excessive, claiming he'd simply been having a bad day. Others accused Marcus of overstepping his authority, suggesting he was exploiting the situation for publicity. Despite the backlash, Marcus remained steadfast in his decision. He understood that progress often came with resistance, but he refused to let fear dictate his choices. In the days that followed, Officer Harris struggled to cope with the fallout. Stripped of his badge and reputation, he found himself questioning whether he'd truly deserved such harsh consequences. At first, bitterness consumed him. He blamed Maya, Marcus, and even the passengers who'd witnessed the altercation. But, slowly, grudgingly, he began to see things differently. A friend convinced him to enroll in a sensitivity training program offered by a local nonprofit organization. Reluctantly, Harris agreed, thinking it might help him land a new job someday. What he didn't expect was how much it would challenge his worldview. Through role-playing exercises, discussions, and candid feedback from facilitators, Harris started to understand the impact of his actions. not just on Maya, but on countless others who'd endured similar treatment. One evening, after completing a particularly eye-opening session, Harris approached the instructor. "I messed up," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Big time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fix it, but I want to try." The instructor smiled faintly, recognizing the sincerity in his words. "Acknowledging your mistakes is the first step," she said. "Now it's up to you to decide what comes next." Harris nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe redemption wasn't impossible after all. While Harris embarked on his journey of self-reflection, Maya and Marcus continued theirs. Together, they launched a campaign called Fly with Respect, designed to promote inclusivity and accountability within the aviation industry. Airlines across the country took notice, with several pledging to adopt similar measures in their own operations. Through it all, Maya reflected on the events that had unfolded. She hadn't set out to become an advocate or a symbol of resilience, but life had a way of steering you toward paths you never anticipated. And though the road ahead promised challenges, she faced them head-on, knowing she wasn't alone. For Maya and Marcus, this wasn't just about fixing a broken system, it was about building a better one. One where respect wasn't optional, but expected. One where voices like hers weren't silenced, but celebrated. And one where stories like hers didn't end in anger, but in hope. As the plane soared into the night sky, Maya gazed out the window, her thoughts drifting to the future. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: she was ready. The days following Officer Greg Harris's dismissal were anything but ordinary. News of the incident spread like wildfire, fueled by social media posts, news articles, and heated discussions among travelers who had witnessed the altercation at the airport. Some praised Marcus Thompson for taking swift action, while others criticized him for what they saw as an overreaction. Regardless of public opinion, one thing was clear: the fallout from this single event would ripple far beyond the confines of the airport. For Harris, life had become a whirlwind of shame, regret, and uncertainty. Stripped of his position and reputation, he found himself grappling with emotions he hadn't anticipated. At first, bitterness consumed him. He blamed Maya for making that phone call, Marcus for wielding his power so decisively, and even the ITO passengers who'd stared judgmentally during the confrontation. But as time passed, Harris began to realize that his anger was misplaced. The real culprit wasn't anyone else. It was himself. One evening, sitting alone in his small apartment, Harris scrolled through online comments about the incident. Most were harsh, calling him out for his behavior and labeling him as yet another example of systemic discrimination. A few, however, offered glimmers of hope. One commenter wrote, "Everyone deserves a second chance. If Harris learns from this, maybe he can turn things around." Reading those words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time since losing his job, Harris allowed himself to consider the possibility of redemption. Determined to make amends, he reached out to a friend who worked in human resources. After explaining the situation, Harris asked if there were any programs or workshops that could help him better understand diversity and inclusion. His friend recommended a local nonprofit organization that specialized in sensitivity training for individuals seeking personal growth. Though hesitant at first, Harris enrolled in the program, hoping it might open doors to new opportunities, or at least give him peace of mind. Meanwhile, Maya and Marcus continued their efforts to drive meaningful change. Their campaign, Fly with Respect, gained traction not only locally but also nationally. Airlines across the country began reaching out to express interest in adopting similar initiatives. Some companies pledged to implement mandatory diversity training for all employees, while others committed to establishing anonymous reporting systems for passengers who experienced discrimination. Even competitors of Skyline Airlines joined the movement, recognizing that this wasn't just about individual businesses, it was about reshaping an entire industry. Maya, in particular, became a prominent figure in these discussions. She gave interviews, attended panel discussions, and collaborated with advocacy groups to amplify marginalized voices. Her calm demeanor and eloquent speeches inspired many, earning her respect from both allies and skeptics alike. Yet despite her growing influence, Maya remained grounded. She often reminded herself and others that this journey wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about creating a world where no one had to endure the kind of disrespect she'd faced at the airport. Marcus, too, played a crucial role in advancing their mission. As CEO of Airlines, he used his platform to push for policy changes that prioritized inclusivity and accountability. He introduced incentives for employees who demonstrated exceptional customer service, ensuring that kindness and professionalism were rewarded. Additionally, he established partnerships with schools and community organizations to educate young people about the importance of empathy and respect. By investing in future generations, Marcus hoped to create a culture shift that would last long after he was gone. Despite their successes, Maya and Marcus weren't immune to criticism. Some accused them of using the incident as a publicity stunt, claiming they cared more about appearances than genuine reform. Others argued that firing Officer Harris was too extreme, insisting he should have been given another chance instead. While these accusations stung, Maya and Marcus refused to let negativity derail their progress. They understood that change rarely came without resistance, and they were willing to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Back at the airport, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Passengers reported feeling safer and more respected, thanks in part to the new protocols implemented by management. Security personnel underwent rigorous training sessions designed to address implicit biases and improve communication skills. Supervisors conducted regular evaluations to ensure compliance, holding staff accountable for any lapses in professionalism. Slowly but surely, the airport transformed into a space where everyone felt welcome, regardless of race, gender, or background. Officer Harris, meanwhile, made significant strides in his own journey. The sensitivity training program proved to be eye-opening, challenging him to confront uncomfortable truths about his past behavior. Through role-playing exercises, group discussions, and candid feedback from facilitators, Harris began to understand the impact of his words and actions, not just on Maya but on countless others who'd endured similar treatment. One session stood out in particular. Participants were asked to share personal stories of discrimination, whether they'd experienced it themselves or witnessed it happening to someone else. Listening to these accounts left Harris shaken. He realized how deeply ingrained prejudice could be, often manifesting in subtle ways that went unnoticed until it was too late. Determined to break free from those patterns, Harris vowed to approach every interaction with empathy and humility moving forward. By the end of the program, Harris felt like a different person, though he knew he couldn't undo the harm he'd caused. He believed he could still make a positive impact. With newfound confidence, he applied for jobs in fields unrelated to law enforcement, hoping to start fresh. To his surprise, several employers expressed interest, impressed by his willingness to learn and grow. Eventually, Harris landed a position as a customer service representative for a retail chain, a role that allowed him to interact with people in a constructive way. As weeks turned into months, the story of Maya, Marcus, and Officer Harris continued to unfold. Each chapter brought its own lessons, triumphs, and setbacks. For Maya and Marcus, the experience reinforced the importance of using privilege responsibly. They understood that true progress required more than addressing individual incidents. It demanded systemic change, and though the road ahead promised challenges, they faced them together, united by love, resilience, and a shared vision of a better world. For Officer Harris, the journey was far from over. Redemption wasn't something that happened overnight. It took time, effort, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But as he settled into his new role, Harris couldn't help but feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild his life and prove that people really could change. And for the countless travelers passing through the airport each day, the changes sparked by this incident served as a reminder that their voices mattered. Whether they were boarding a plane, waiting at the gate, or simply observing the world around them, they now knew that standing up for what was right could lead to something greater than they ever imagined. In the end, the fallout wasn't just about holding someone accountable. It was about inspiring others to do the same. It was about proving that even in moments of conflict, there was always an opportunity to grow, educate, and inspire. And for Maya, Marcus, and Officer Harris, that lesson would stay with them forever. Weeks had passed since the incident at the airport, but its impact lingered like a ripple in a pond, spreading far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. For Maya Thompson, Marcus Thompson, and even Officer Greg Harris, life had changed in profound ways, some for the better, others still requiring work. As they each reflected on their journeys, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about one moment of conflict. It was a story about growth, accountability, and the power of using influence to create positive change. Maya sat in her home office late one evening, staring out the window as raindrops streaked down the glass. Her mind wandered back to the day she'd encountered Officer Harris at the boarding gate. The memory still stung, not because of his words, but because of how deeply ingrained such experiences were in her life. She thought about all the times she'd been treated unfairly simply because of the color of her skin, the dismissive glances, the condescending tones, the assumptions people made before even knowing her name. Yet despite the pain, she felt a sense of gratitude. That single phone call to Marcus hadn't just resolved her immediate problem, it had ignited something much bigger, a movement toward justice and equality. Over the past few weeks, Maya had thrown herself into advocacy, work with renewed energy. Through Fly with Respect, the campaign she and Marcus had launched, she connected with countless individuals who shared similar stories of discrimination. Some were passengers who'd faced rude treatment from airline staff or security personnel. Others were employees within the aviation industry who felt marginalized because of their race, gender, or background. Listening to these stories strengthened Maya's resolve to keep pushing for systemic reform. One particular conversation stood out in her mind. A young woman named Tanya, an aspiring pilot struggling to break into a male-dominated field, reached out to Maya after seeing her speak at a panel discussion. Over coffee, Tanya shared how often she was underestimated or dismissed during job interviews. "People look at me and assume I don't belong here," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But I know I can do this, I just need someone to believe in me." Maya listened intently, nodding as Tanya spoke. When the young woman finished, Maya leaned forward and said firmly, "You do belong here, and if no one else believes in you, I will." It was a simple promise, but one that meant the world to Tanya and to Maya herself. In mentoring others, Maya found purpose. She realized that her experience at the airport wasn't just about her. It was about paving the way for future generations to thrive without facing the same obstacles. Marcus, too, spent his days reflecting on the broader implications of what had happened. As CEO of Skyline Airlines, he understood the weight of his responsibility, not only to his company but also to society as a whole. He knew that businesses had the power to shape culture, and he wanted Skyline Airlines to be a force for good. To that end, he introduced several groundbreaking initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity and respect across all levels of the organization. One such initiative was the creation of a diversity advisory board composed of employees, passengers, and community leaders. This board met regularly to review policies, address concerns, and propose innovative solutions to challenges facing underrepresented groups. Marcus also implemented a mentorship program pairing senior executives with junior staff members from diverse backgrounds, ensuring that talent wasn't overlooked due to bias or lack of opportunity. Despite these efforts, Marcus faced pushback from certain quarters. Some longtime employees grumbled about the changes, claiming they were unnecessary or overly political. Others argued that focusing so heavily on diversity detracted from the company's primary goal, profitability. But Marcus refused to compromise. He believed that true success wasn't measured solely by financial gains. It was measured by the positive impact a company had on its people and communities. "You can't separate ethics from business," he told his team during a company-wide meeting. "If we want to be leaders in this industry, we need to lead with integrity. That means treating everyone, employees, passengers, partners, with dignity and respect. If we lose sight of that, then we've failed." His words resonated deeply with many employees, especially those who had previously felt overlooked or undervalued. Slowly but surely, the culture within Skyline Airlines began to shift. Conversations about diversity and inclusion became commonplace, and employees started holding each other accountable in ways they never had before. Though change didn't happen overnight, the progress was undeniable. Meanwhile, Officer Greg Harris continued his journey of self-reflection and redemption. After completing the sensitivity training program, he landed a new job as a customer service representative at a local retail chain. At first, the transition was difficult. Harris worried that news of his dismissal would follow him everywhere, making it impossible to start fresh. But to his surprise, his new employer welcomed him warmly, emphasizing the importance of second chances. In his role, Harris interacted with customers from all walks of life, many of whom came from backgrounds vastly different from his own. Each interaction served as a reminder of the lessons he'd learned during his training, lessons about empathy, active listening, and the value of treating every person with kindness. Over time, Harris discovered a newfound passion for helping others. Whether it was assisting an elderly shopper find a specific item or calming a frustrated customer, he approached every task with sincerity and care. Still, Harris couldn't shake the guilt he felt for his past actions. He often replayed the scene at the airport in his mind, wishing he could go back and handle things differently. One day, unable to bear the weight of his regret any longer, he decided to write a letter, an apology addressed not just to Maya, but to everyone he'd wronged over the years. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," he began, his pen hovering nervously above the paper. "I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for my behavior at the airport. My words and actions were disrespectful and hurtful, and for that, I take full responsibility. I can't undo what happened, but I hope you'll believe me when I say I'm trying to become a better person." He went on to describe the steps he'd taken to educate himself, including enrolling in the sensitivity training program and committing to personal growth. "I understand now that being part of a solution requires more than just acknowledging mistakes. It requires action. Moving forward, I pledge to treat every individual with the respect and dignity they deserve." When Harris sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mailbox, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. Writing the letter hadn't erased his guilt entirely, but it had given him closure, a chance to make amends, however small. As fate would have it, Maya received the letter on a quiet Sunday morning. Sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, she opened the envelope and read Harris's words carefully. Initially, she felt a mix of emotions: anger, skepticism, and eventually, compassion. While she doubted whether an apology could fully repair the harm caused, she appreciated the effort. More importantly, she recognized that true healing required forgiveness, not just from others, but from oneself. That evening, Maya shared the letter with Marcus. Together, they discussed its significance. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong," Marcus said thoughtfully. "And it takes even more courage to try to change. Maybe this is a sign that we're heading in the right direction." Maya nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Maybe it is," she replied softly. "At the very least, it shows that people are capable of growth, if they're willing to put in the work." As the sun set outside their window, casting golden hues across the room, Maya and Marcus reflected on everything they'd accomplished, and everything that still lay ahead. They knew the fight for equality and respect was far from over, but they also knew they weren't alone. Across industries, communities, and borders, countless individuals were joining the cause, united by a shared belief in a brighter future. For Maya, Marcus, and even Officer Harris, the journey was ongoing. But through reflection, resolution, and relentless determination, they proved that even in moments of darkness there was always room for light. And sometimes, all it took was one act of courage to spark a revolution. Months had passed since the incident at the airport, but its impact continued to reverberate through the lives of those involved and beyond. For Maya Thompson, Marcus Thompson, and Officer Greg Harris, the experience had become a defining moment, shaping not only their personal journeys but also the broader narrative of accountability, growth, and resilience. As they each moved forward, they carried with them lessons that would guide their actions for years to come. Maya's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. What began as a frustrating encounter at the boarding gate had evolved into a platform for advocacy and change. Her work with Fly with Respect had gained national attention, earning her invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and corporate events. Each time she stepped onto a stage or sat down for an interview, Maya reminded herself of why she was there, not for recognition, but to amplify voices that had long been silenced. One evening, while preparing for a keynote address at a major diversity summit, Maya reflected on how far she'd come. She thought about the countless hours spent brainstorming ideas with Marcus, collaborating with advocacy groups, and mentoring young professionals like Tanya, the aspiring pilot. These connections had taught her something profound. True leadership wasn't about standing above others. It was about lifting them up alongside you. As she stood before the audience that night, Maya shared her story openly, weaving humor, vulnerability, and wisdom into her speech. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said, her voice steady yet warm. "It starts with small steps, listening when someone speaks, acknowledging your biases, and being willing to learn. But most importantly, it requires courage. The courage to stand up for what's right even when it feels uncomfortable." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, many of whom approached her afterward to express gratitude. One woman, a flight attendant who had faced discrimination throughout her career, hugged Maya tightly and whispered, "Thank you for giving us hope." In that moment, Maya realized that her efforts were making a tangible difference, not just in policies or programs, but in people's lives. Marcus, too, found fulfillment in the ripple effects of their campaign. His initiatives at Skyline Airlines had set a new standard for inclusivity within the aviation industry. Competitors took notice, adopting similar practices to avoid falling behind. Employees reported feeling more valued and respected, knowing their concerns wouldn't be dismissed. Passengers praised the airline for creating a safer, more welcoming environment, a testament to Marcus's unwavering commitment to excellence. Yet, despite his achievements, Marcus remained humble. He often reminded himself that success wasn't measured by accolades or profits, but by the positive impact he had on others. During team meetings, he encouraged employees to share their thoughts and ideas freely, emphasizing that innovation thrived when diverse perspectives were embraced. He also made it a point to visit airports regularly, observing firsthand how passengers interacted with staff and identifying areas where improvements could still be made. One afternoon, while walking through a bustling terminal, Marcus overheard a conversation between two travelers. One of them, a middle-aged man, was praising Skyline Airlines for its recent changes. "I've flown with them for years," he said, "but lately, I've noticed something different. The staff seems happier, and everyone's treated fairly. It makes a huge difference." Marcus smiled to himself, feeling a quiet sense of pride. It wasn't about him. It was about the collective effort of everyone who believed in the mission. Still, moments like these reaffirmed his belief that progress, no matter how incremental, mattered. For Officer Greg Harris, the road to redemption was challenging but rewarding. His new job at the retail chain provided stability and purpose, allowing him to rebuild his confidence piece by piece. Interacting with customers from all walks of life taught him invaluable lessons about empathy and communication. Whether assisting a stressed mother juggling toddlers or helping an elderly man navigate the aisles, Harris approached every task with patience and kindness. Though he still struggled with guilt, Harris found solace in the knowledge that he was actively working to improve. He attended follow-up workshops offered by the nonprofit organization that had helped him earlier, deepening his understanding of systemic issues like racism and bias. He also volunteered at local community centers, mentoring at-risk youth and encouraging them to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. One Saturday morning, while volunteering at a neighborhood cleanup event, Harris struck up a conversation with a teenager named Jamal. The boy confided in Harris about his struggles with bullying at school, admitting that he often felt invisible because of his race and socioeconomic background. Listening intently, Harris shared his own experiences, offering advice without judgment. By the end of their talk, Jamal looked at Harris with newfound admiration. "Thanks, man," he said simply. "You get it." That brief exchange left Harris feeling hopeful. If he could inspire even one person to believe in themselves, then his journey toward redemption would be worth it. Meanwhile, Maya and Marcus continued to support each other as partners in both life and activism. Their bond had grown stronger through shared challenges and triumphs, reminding them of the importance of unity in the face of adversity. Together, they expanded Fly with Respect to include global initiatives, partnering with international airlines and organizations to promote inclusivity worldwide. One evening, as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset, Maya turned to Marcus and asked, "Do you think we've done enough?" Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "We'll never do enough," he replied. "There's always more work to be done, but what matters is that we keep trying. Every step counts, no matter how small." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with determination. She knew the fight for equality was far from over, but she also knew they weren't alone. Across industries, communities, and borders, countless individuals were joining the cause, united by a shared vision of a better world. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Maya and Marcus reflected on everything they'd accomplished and everything that still lay ahead. They understood that true progress required persistence, humility, and collaboration. It demanded not only addressing individual incidents, but also dismantling systems that perpetuated inequality. And though the journey promised challenges, they faced them together, drawing strength from their love and commitment to justice. For Officer Harris, the lesson was clear. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a process. He knew he couldn't erase his past mistakes, but he could shape his future through action. Each day presented an opportunity to prove that people could change, and Harris seized those opportunities with unwavering resolve. In the end, the story of Maya, Marcus, and Officer Harris wasn't just about conflict or resolution. It was about transformation. It was about proving that even in moments of darkness, there was always room for light. It was about showing that accountability, empathy, and perseverance could create ripples of change that extended far beyond what anyone could imagine. As they looked toward the horizon, Maya, Marcus, and Harris remained steadfast in their missions. They understood that the fight for equality was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance and effort. But they also recognized that every act of courage, no matter how small, contributed to a greater movement, a movement rooted in respect, compassion, and hope. And so they pressed onward, united by a shared belief in a brighter tomorrow. For Maya, Marcus, and Harris, this wasn't just their story. It was a call to action for everyone willing to listen, learn, and lead. Because in the end, the greatest legacy wasn't what you achieved for yourself. It was what you inspired others to achieve for the world.